coming to my talk on growing software engineering leadership competencies. So, in 2011, a gentleman named Andreessen Horowitz, he made the statement, "Software is eating the world." I think that seemed to trend in whatever way things trended back then, and it referred to the concept that software was cannibalizing traditional businesses. So, sort of technology. So think about your brick and mortar businesses being replaced by an online shop, for example. So following that, then, there was a couple of things then written about, like, if we're going to have this demand for software engineering, like we surely are heading towards a shortage of the amount of software engineers available to do so. So typically you think, we don't have enough engineers, maybe we should produce some more. But my experience is quite different. So this is a quote from Hendricks, that's today, that's me saying this right now. I'm finding one hire in 100 candidates. So, I think there are enough software engineers out there, whether they are meeting the job requirements or have the right experience. I think that's the issue, and whether they train correctly. A simple example, and this we find with a lot of candidates, is that one of the things you talk about, like, what's your experience with unit testing, and someone would say, actually my manager said that we don't have enough time for unit testing, so we can't do that. So then you ask about how do you test, etc., and the conversation goes on. But that's quite a common theme in the recruiting world currently. So you've got two approaches to solve this gap that's between the supply and demand of what industry needs and what we've got available. You can either produce more, and you've seen quite a lot of initiatives around that. We've got our coding boot camps, we've got the universities. You can do online training. There's quite a lot of things around that. Or you can improve what we have. So not only the existing cohort of software engineers, but the way we build software, the way we arrange teams. And my sort of interest is, from a causal approach, is if we want to improve the capabilities of what we have, one group of people we can influence is the software engineering leaders themselves. So this refers to your typical software engineering managers, software development managers, whatever you want to call them. But if we were to train them more appropriately and improve the competencies they have, we may see some causal effect on the supply of engineering capability, whether that's more developers or better developers or the better ways of working. And I think it's also a smaller problem to address. Still not a very small problem, but it's better than trying to multiply the amount of engineers out there. So last year I undertook a study to address this issue as part of my studies, and the research question I asked was, how do we improve the software engineering management competencies of software engineering leaders? And I wasn't too interested in what's a good leader, what's a good manager, what does competency mean. I found quite a lot of books and resources around that, people speaking about their current roles and how to do that more effectively. I was really interested in that journey that engineering managers of today undertook to become who they are. So whether that's starting off as a developer and then progressing into a software engineering manager. So that was sort of the focus of what I understand. What is their lived experience of getting there? So just a short outline in case you want to plan your nap after lunch. I'm just going to talk about me a little bit, just so you have some context, talk about my research approach and the findings I got from this research, and then the proposal for a model that I want to put forward and get feedback from the community on, which is really the aim of this talk, and then maybe practical steps you can take to grow others or grow your own skills. And then I'll talk about my experience in trying some of these things out and future plans for that. So just a little bit about me. So that's my picture there. My name is Aziz Hendricks. I'm currently the head of engineering and in the retail department at Allen Gray. This is a feedback from my colleague that saw my picture on the DevConf website, and she said, you should sue them for that photo they put on the website. So, and I put that photo there myself. And I was able to change it, but I owned it. I kept it up there. But I think that's a good leadership trait from her, integrity. And yeah, and then I gave her some negative performance feedback after that, just to get her back. And that's a bad leadership trait, revenge. So just keep that in mind. Just a little bit about Alan Gray. Yeah, we are sponsors, so I thought I'd talk about us a bit. We've got over 100 software engineers that spread across 30 plus tech teams across infrastructure and software development. We deploy into production quite a lot. Our tech stack, we'd like to think it's quite decent. But my favorite part about Alan Gray is the location where we are. So you don't need to semi-migrate to a town far away to be near the ocean when you can work at Alan Gray right in the harbor. And it's a stone throws away. But just be careful. Sometimes there's seals and whales in that little harbor there, and you might hit them from time to time. So just be careful there. My own management journey, that's just for the context of this talk. As I started off managing myself, so I think that's an important phase, managing your own capability. And I spent about managing other developers did about 70 over my career, and managing other managers about 25. And now currently I manage about 4 manager of managers. A very interesting phase of my career was when I was managing 30 direct reports at the same time across various roles. So I spent about 15 hours per week just having catch-ups with people. And then 15 hours a week just actions and preparation for those catch-ups. So that's quite an interesting time on top of my other responsibilities as well. So learned quite a lot in that process. Tech stack journey, that's interesting to you. I started off as your typical Java developer, dabbling with some Spring, deploying to a very simple Tomcat container. Things then really escalated from there with vendor-based applications and your Web 2.0 world with Angular, mobile development. And now where I am now, you think managers have to do less in terms of the tech, but it just really got much broader. So there's quite a lot of technologies that are involved in getting a team going nowadays. Cool, so back to my master's thesis. It was a 3-month focused period that I spent last year, so it's a few months since then. I've moved on from it, but this has brought back a lot of memories for me. The findings of it's not revolutionary, it's not going to change the industry, but I think most master's theses, you find a lot of useful things. My goal, as I said, is just to share what I found and then get feedback. So I'll provide a feedback mechanism just so I can learn more about it and maybe refine it. And I think just the good news is I passed, so at least there was some value and someone else thought it was useful. So there is some credibility there. Cool, so the research approach, I don't want to bore you, there's quite a lot of detail in there, but in a nutshell, there were three ways I approached this. I did a decent literature review, and then I applied a technique called, which I'm still trying to pronounce, so just bear with me, phenomenology, and then design science was part of it, because I really wanted to come up with a solution that I could maybe move forward with rather than just have some findings. So let's talk about phenomenology. It just in a nutshell, it's if I simplify it, it's essentially to fully describe the lived experience. And in this context, that's the lived experience of software engineers, asking them, like, how did you acquire these skills? What journey do you undertake to get there? So a simple example of how I do that is in an interview, face-to-face interview, I'd ask someone, what did you have for breakfast? And you could say, I had egg. That's your simple answer. But looking at the entire lived experience, I could tell that the person, didn't really enjoy the egg, just from the way they said it or their facial expression. But then by smelling their breath, and I could understand maybe that egg didn't taste good, maybe it was rotten. And you could dig deeper and then understand, okay, why was the egg rotten? Maybe load shedding played into that and the fridge was off or something. So this is the kind of questioning pause you take when trying to understand what people went through when acquiring these skills. I used a technique, just this might bore you, but called IPA. I think this is more interesting because someone told me last week IPA actually means something else. Indian Pale Ale or something, yeah. So, but that was the technique used. And moving on to the actual literature, so just so you know where I targeted that research, essentially there were a couple of keywords I used, but the 3 core things was leadership, software engineering management, and software engineering. So it was essentially the intersection of those 3 things that really interested me. Here's a quick snapshot of that. You find the typical things like DevOps, continuous delivery, agile, some leadership practices that I came across there. So it's quite a lot of findings. Obviously, it's quite a broad field. But what was really interesting, and I was quite shocked that I only discovered this like so many years into my career, was this body of knowledge called the software engineering body of knowledge, which is something the IEEE and ACM backed as a standard to try to capture our entire career as software engineers. And this is just one part of it, the software engineering management competencies that they felt was important. So that's just out of interest. I think this is quite useful if somebody wants to delve into certain topics to start with this document. Management itself, I found two really interesting studies. There was the Google and the Microsoft quite large-scale studies where they tried to understand what makes a good manager. And interestingly, there were quite a lot of overlap in their findings, which is quite promising. So you'd see something like has a clear vision and strategy for the team, and then on the Microsoft side, they found driving alignment as a very important activity in that. But one thing that really bothered me and comes up a lot is in that they've emphasized is how technical should these managers be, and the answer that the research shows is that software engineering managers must be technical. Following on that, you might ask, like, what does it mean? Does it mean I have to go code? What am I supposed to be doing as a technical manager? And I found this very interesting diagram that I think really articulates it well. And in this view of it, if I start from in your side, I think that's the right, being technical is about comprehension. So you can comprehend systems, tasks, technologies, problems, and complexity. And obviously, to get that comprehension, you need to practice some of these skills. But how you use that and what adds value is that you're able to use that to facilitate things like you can grow people through mentoring, you can review code, and you can lead discussions, estimate effort, spot flaws, make suggestions. So those kinds of activities is where it becomes valuable, and I think differentiates a general manager from a software engineering manager. And then, this is nicely encapsulated in this image here, where it tries to depict the various functions that managers should have. So at an individual level and an organization level, there are three main activities. You're cultivating things like you're growing talent at individual level, you're guiding the team, and you're doing motivation. So you're motivating individual people, and you may be inspiring teams. So that sort of applies to the mediation as well. And one thing that encapsulates these functions is the is available part. So that's really tough to do for managers. It alluded to, out of all these things, make yourself available, be approachable, don't be in 30 one-on-ones per week. But I think this is also a good reference if you want to know what your job is. So that's the very specific software engineering management things that I found. Moving on to the leadership. So if I independently just researched leadership, you find that things about the writings and beliefs around leadership evolved since 1840. In 1840, we were all about, he was born to lead, or he's a tall man, therefore a great leader. Exclude Napoleon from that, but the things have really evolved to modern times. Situational leadership was quite trending at a time in the corporates. But where we are now is that transactional leadership and transformational leadership, I think these are things that you may come across more often in your context. Transformational leadership being where leaders are trying to be more purpose goal-driven. They're trying to drive alignment between leaders and followers and those things. So what I did was, I then tried to take all of these findings and try to synthesize them into something useful. So I mapped out all the properties that we expect from continuous integration, agile, DevOps, and I compared them to what these leadership styles were trying to convey. And what I found was that transformational leadership and transactional leadership actually added quite a lot of value and had quite a tight alignment to what we're doing in software engineering. So from that, I concluded that those are quite useful leadership styles to look into when trying to build your competencies around this. A small example is transformational leadership looks at building high trust, building high collaboration. And if you compare that to a key principle of DevOps, which is collaboration, you know, there's quite a lot of alignment, and I hope you can see that in the diagram, all these sort of links that I found between those things. Okay, so just in summary, I think those two are quite important, you know, leadership styles to consider in this field. So let me talk about the actual interviews that I did. So this is where I found, you know, the things from a set of managers that have been doing this for maybe 5 to 10 years of their lives, and then looking back and trying to understand how they got there. Here's a simple like excerpt from one of those interviews. There's a quote, there's my comments, and then there's an example of a theme that I derived from that. And I would have done this over various people, looking at the same text many times and iterating till I came across a set of themes. And luckily you don't have to go through that, but this is the set of themes that you know, got surfaced out of these interviews. So there are quite a lot of useful things in there, but the three that are quite relevant were, you know, and if I walked away now, this is essentially the thesis here that you're seeing, is that the things that really made an impact on these people's lives in order to grow these skills, you know, may seem quite obvious, but first and foremost, there was some formal leadership and management training in their journey, quite early on. They had a strong mentor, and they spent time mentoring others. And then they had something which I redefined as experiential learning. So they had a lot of opportunity to actually do parts of the job early on in their career without knowing they're working towards that. And that sort of opened up a lot of learning paths for them to get there. So here's a simple quote from one of the things, like someone said, the insight that I got from these studies kind of broadened my mind. And you know, something that I derived from that was that the formal training really was a catalyst for people. Even if you went there and you're like, you know, I know this stuff, it's really obvious, I saw a YouTube video about this, but it really catalyzed them to go, you know, this seems to be quite credible, and I'm going to look into this more. And then it opened up a lot of things for them in their learning journey. Being mentored and mentoring others is quite impactful. I think this is maybe an obvious one, but the mentoring others part also seems to have been a big part for them. So like they mentored somebody, dabbled, and then that's sort of their first step into management that they then took forward. And I even had an interesting comment where someone said that I had a terrible mentor, but I really learned like from that mentor on what kind of leadership I don't want to, you know, move forward with. So that's interesting. And then experiential learning. So somebody said you can't really emphasize if you haven't really been in the trench. Another statement was own the burn-up chart or burn. So that refers to the sprint chart. So, you know, actually do it. Don't come and stand here behind the scrum board and then, you know, make a comment on the burn-up chart, but be involved to gain experience, to understand, you know, the complexities of what people are going through. So putting this all in context, just moving it back into, you know, my original research question, I wanted to, you know, make better managers in software engineering. So I found 3 mechanisms to do so, and you know, that's just a list of the context of what I believe, you know, helps with that. And then, yeah, let's get on to the design. I think we're running out of time as well. What I really wanted to get out of the study was to give something that we can look at and use. So I used the design science approach, and they say every good solution starts with asking the right design question. So there's just an example of some of those questions I asked. One is, how do I create opportunities in the workplace where others can practice management before taking on management roles? I then did, took a lot of these things and then did another literature review to understand what's out there, spoke to a couple of people. And for the leadership training, I think it's quite a lot of things out there that we all know about. Like you could do your MBA, you could do short courses, do your internal company courses. But what really stood out for me, and something I don't come across, is this concept of engineering leadership training. And what I found, there's about 50 of these institutions in North America, and sadly we have nothing in Africa. But they're teaching leadership in the context of engineering. There's definitely a lot of momentum around that, and when you look at what they are actually teaching there seem to be 3 sort of themes across that. And those are, they're trying to teach people to realize vision, mission, and stakeholder goals. they're trying to build attitudes around being effective leaders, and they're trying to create self and situational awareness in engineers. And you know, so it's really sad that we don't have that, but there's definitely a growing, you know, opportunity there for people to attend that learning. The other one was much harder because you know, a lot of the managers sort of alluded to the fact that they stumbled across opportunities. So you know, I always thought, like, what if you don't get the chance to do this and that? Would you have still been there? So this is really about how do you create the opportunities for learning these skills, and what's being used out there in practice is something called these technical and leadership labs. So they actually create an environment where, you know, you try to go through a process, but you also apply something called a learning cycle. So that's where the experiential part comes on. So you actually do the thing, and then you reflect on that, and you learn, and then apply the skills again, and then learn again. So it's a cycle of learning that you know, it's found to be quite useful out there for this thing. So let's get into the actual model now. So this is where a bit of a creativity now, where I put things together and try to say, if you wanted to reference something, this is what you can. So this is just a part of it. But in the blocks here, I've sort of placed a lot of the example labs that are out there in the field that people are using to train these skills. And then it's wrapped around this concept of the experiential cycle. So essentially, do the labs, reflect on the experience, learn from the experience, and try out what you've learned. And then, you know, keep on doing that and growing that skill. And you can create many different scenarios to work on leadership skills in that way. Another part of the model is just a nice picture for you on all these things I've mentioned. You know, if you want to just say, like, what next? What am I going to learn next? Maybe you want to work on realizing a vision or setting up a mission. So you could do a lab that then aligns to that to gain that skill. And then, yeah, this is the total model, and I'll take you through this, you know, from the beginning, just to summarize it. I named it SEL. I know maybe it's a bad name, but it's Software Engineering Leadership Learning. And if you had to just start by you know, using this, you could say that the first step is do some formal training, or get somebody to do some formal training. So that's sort of the start of the experience. And then based on that, or other things that you found in the competencies, try to start having these experience and growing these skills via technical or leadership labs. And then, yeah, this is the snapshot of those things to refer to and saying, look, what am I going to try and do next, or what should I develop, you know, on my journey? And then obviously get a mentor. So having that mentorship layer and coaching layer is quite valuable in this process, and trying to mentor others. So yeah, just recap practical steps. I think, yeah, number one, undergo some kind of formal and leadership training. Do some labs. I haven't designed them yet, or don't have detail on that yet, but that's the potential next step. Have the support of a mentor, coach, and a sponsor, and mentor others, and then, you know, look at this body of knowledge and try and understand, like, what do I need to improve on next and grow in. So I've tried a few of these things before the study and throughout my career. One thing was quite a difficult one to get through, but having intermediate developers actually manage new starter graduates for a 3-month period, for example. What we found there, obviously the HR was quite nervous about this, but we did support these people with experienced managers. But we found that the new grads seemed to have a stronger connection with these early line managers, you know, in that 3 months. So that helped with that initial onboarding, and also we found that people gained confidence in it and helped them with a career choice. They said, look, this is not for me, or this is, you know, I really love this. It's really demystified it. So that was useful. A few years ago, I started up a mentorship program at work. You know, what I found with that, the demystifying of what mentorship is, was quite useful in accelerating people to be mentored and be good mentees, because that's a big part of that journey. And then we also allow people to, you know, actually run projects, like low-risk projects that we can, you know, build a nice safety net around. So, example, our internships, that's run by, you know, previous grads or previous interns. So they actually learn that entire, you know, project management, you know, life cycle. And obviously we get free project management out of that. So those are just some things that I've dabbled in and learned from, and I found quite useful. So future research, I've got a domain called engineeringmanagement.org. I think it's still up, or well, I'm not sure if I paid it in the last year, but I registered a while back. So, I plan on really, growing that out, putting some content on there. It's blank now. Actually creating these labs that I've mentioned, they don't exist. So, putting in some detail and making it accessible to people. And then a more ambitious approach is creating some or getting some momentum around getting an engineering leadership program in Africa itself. So I don't think any of the universities offer anything close to that currently, and I think that can make a big impact. And then I want to gather feedback from the community. So this is the start to that. So that's my email address, and there's a Menti QR code for you to scan there if you want to just capture a couple of comments there for me to read and use going forward. And then, back to the original aim of this, just to put it back in context. So with all these findings, I think, it's possible, if everything works out, that, we can use this to train our software engineering leaders better and therefore improve their skills, and then maybe we'll get better software engineering output and skills out there in industry. Cool, that's the end. So just lastly, rate me there. I think there's a rating website there, and maybe I'll win a power bank or something, or maybe I won't get invited back. But yeah, that's it. Any questions?
So I'm a SEM, full disclosure. It's really cool to see someone supporting the narrative of having technical leadership. You don't have to write the code and understand exactly what's happening, but you need to understand how the pieces all fit together and give guidance and leadership on that. My question might be a bit selfish, but to say the next step up, so you've trained technical competencies at a leadership perspective, but when you become a leader of leaders, how important is that technical background then? And I suppose and then if it is important, how would you maintain that technical knowledge when you get further and further away from the detail?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a research-backed answer to that. I have a very personal opinion on that, and I think it's I mean, in a nutshell, it's very important to remain technical throughout. I mean, if you're looking at, we had a great keynote talk. I mean, you can see that somebody leading a company is very technical in that situation. And I think if we're trying to keep on, pushing the boundaries in tech and pushing the industry forward, I think people need to be on the ground. I don't think they necessarily need to be coding. But I do, just instinct is that you should be technical as far as you can. And how you do that, I mean, one day when I'm there, I'll try and see how to solve that one.
Thank you.
Just one over at the back there.
Hi, thanks. You mentioned the idea of having somebody a bit more junior mentor the complete juniors.
Line manager, yeah.
At what point does that stop being a good idea? In other words, I mean, obviously, two complete juniors are not going to work, but there's some level in there where it becomes sensible.
So we do it only at the graduate level. So somebody's just started their first job, and then you've got somebody maybe working for 2 years, but we're fortunate to have a structure above that's sort of skip level managing and supporting that at the same time. So you're not on your own. So if a really complex situation comes up, so let's say somebody is relocated from to a different city and it is really complicated and want to go back home, then we wouldn't let the new manager deal with that. We'd support that. So if there's a nice support structure, I think it's safer. But I think it becomes irresponsible when you're leaving somebody in the deep end alone on that one. There we go.
Just I'd like to ask you, in your thesis, did you cover the difference between leadership and management?
Shortly, yeah.
Because it's used interchangeably, but they are two very different things.
Yeah, so that's why I did mention leadership and management training and not just bulk it together and management to leadership, because I think there's a difference. So I mentioned the Sweebok body of knowledge. That thing is mostly on management. I don't mention much leadership there, but project management, for example, is an example of that. Stakeholder management, those kinds of things that you typically really, find in the textbook and practice and repeat. But the leadership is obviously a lot of those concepts I spoke around, transformational leadership and transactional leadership. And there's much more on this topic. Obviously, I want to keep it quite simple for this, but there's more advanced topics like post-heroic leadership or leaderless teams where there's no leader. So things get quite advanced. Yeah. Cool, that's it. Thanks, everyone. Cool.